Hi, my name is Joseph Martin, and today my presentation is going to be on the archaeological site Meadowcroft Rockshelter. Meadowcroft Rockshelter is part of a larger site called Meadowcroft Rockshelter and Historical Village. This includes not only the rock shelter, but also includes Meadowcroft Historical Village, a prehistoric Indian village, frontier trading post, and a Trails to Train exhibit. This National Historical Landmark is in Washington County, about 27 miles south of Pittsburgh, PA, and is part of the Senator John Heinz History Center in association with the Smithsonian Institution. This area is believed to have human activity dating back 19,000 years ago. This predates by 9,000 years any human activity that was thought to have begun at the end of the Ice Age 10,000 years ago in North America. No one Native American tribe was thought to have settled at this site. Instead, smaller groups of Native Americans consisting of men, women, and children would camp here as they traveled between western Pennsylvania and the Ohio River Valley. As they made their way along Cross Creek, a tributary of the Ohio River, the nationally occurring rock shelter was a favorite place to stop. It was one of the few places along Cross Creek that provided protection from the elements. The humans who traveled here are believed to have come mainly in the fall and stayed overnight for a day or two. These people were not big game hunters, but rather small game hunters and fishermen. They were also avid foragers, sustaining themselves on the abundance of nuts and berries along the creek. The evidence of bones, seeds, flint holes, and basket fragments they left behind would tell the story of the people who stayed at the Meadowcroft Rockshelter. How was the Meadowcroft Rockshelter able to record this ancient activity? To answer this, we will need to study the geology of the rock shelter and how it was created and evolved over time. 70,000 years ago, the current valley did not exist, but was made up of layers of sandstone. The geology of the valley was formed over the next 40,000 years as Cross Creek carved a valley through the soft sandstone. The top layers of sandstone was harder than the lower layers of sandstone, and that allowed for the creation of the rock shelter. This erosion of sandstone continued for another 22,000 years, leaving the rock shelter 40 feet above the creek bed. The rock shelter continues to erode even today, but at a slower rate. Gradually, the roof of the rock shelter becomes the floor of the rock shelter as the sand and stones fall, thereby preserving any artifacts left on the floor in a layer of sand. The discovery and subsequent excavation of Meadowcroft Rockshelter was not at the grand scale of Pompeii, but rather the entire floor of the rock shelter is about 215 square feet. What it lacks in quantity, it makes up in quality, thanks to the care that Albert Miller took with the site before donating it. Albert Miller was an amateur archaeologist who collected arrowheads and other artifacts he found in the area as a boy. On November 12, 1955, while walking near the rock shelter, he noticed a groundhog digging a hole. Upon examining the hole, he began digging and found flint holes, pottery, and intact stone tools. Realizing he may be damaging a valuable archaeological site, Albert stopped digging and began to search for someone who could do a proper excavation. While keeping the discovery a secret from looters and others who may inadvertently contaminate the site, Albert Miller would search for 18 years before offering it to James M. Advasio. Dr. James M. Advasio was an archaeologist who worked for the University of Pittsburgh at that time. He was currently looking for a suitable site close to Pittsburgh that could accommodate a multidisciplinary approach to studying the site that included various science fields. He wanted to involve geologists, semitologists, climatologists, specialists in prehistoric plant and animal life, in addition to training students on the protocols of excavation. At the height of the excavations, students would work at the site from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week for 3 months. James had a deeper vision of the site, one where the site was telling a story that required the appropriate staging to do so. In the educational video shown at the Meadowcroft Rockshelter, James said essentially just studying the archaeology only gives you a tiny portion of the story. And when you involve all of these other types of scholars, you're fleshing out the picture of the past. James ended his vision for staging this site saying, if you don't reconstruct that stage, you might as well be dancing in the dark. He believed this rock shelter was unlike any other that was discovered before, in that it was both deeper physically and it had the potential for being considerably older. Excavation at the Meadowcroft Rockshelter began in 1973. This is a photo of the pavilion being built in 2007 to replace the smaller pavilion that was originally built to protect the site during excavation. The pavilion was then completed in 2008. We learned that the first of the 5 steps in excavating an archaeological site is to establish grid lines. The area under the rock shelter was laid out and the excavation began. The second step of excavation of removing and screening the plowed soil included removing artifacts were left by recent transients that contaminated the site. On the rocky floor was a crude stone fireplace, really just a circle of stones, and in the circle were beer cans, hash pipes, and syringes. Within the shelter, an exploratory trench was dug in a north-south orientation, outside the drip line of the overhang all the way to the back wall. This outlined the earliest locations of the area in the rock shelter, under where the roof had gradually fallen over the millennia and buried the evidence of items that were left behind. They were able to determine the area under the rock shelter had never been disturbed by floods. From this picture, you can see a set of stairs to the left. In the 1970s, a site office occupied the top of the stairs and contained office equipment, along with a computer terminal. The terminal was used for on-site data entry that was transmitted via module to the mainframe computer at the University of Pittsburgh. Meadowcroft Rockshelter site was one of the first to use computers in the field of archaeology and was part of the multidisciplinary effort mentioned previously. The excavation was painstakingly and meticulously done in an incredibly time-consuming manner. The methods used at the Meadowcroft were exceptionally mind-numbing, according to Dr. James M. Advasio, whereas many archaeological sites begin with using a shovel to dig plow trenches. The largest tool used at Meadowcroft for digging was a hand trowel, and because many of the various strata was thinner than a trowel blade, a single-edged razor blade was used to do the digging, so as not to destroy the contents within the layers. From this photo, you can see the different layers of strata after excavation, and the tag markers indicating where different artifacts and features were found. This was the third and fourth step in excavating a site, by documenting what and where something was found, and in the case of artifacts, removing and restoring it. Most of the artifacts recovered at Meadowcroft are stored at the Senator John Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh. To aid them in the analysis of the various layers of strata, the excavators of Meadowcroft employed the help from Westinghouse to install experimental lighting systems that allowed them to illuminate stratigraphic profiles in a variety of ways. This allowed them to maximize the ability to see stratigraphic transformations in profile. As the excavation penetrated through layers of more than 10 feet deep, some 20 levels of fire pits were found, each one progressively older than the previously. Sphere points, also known as early archaic dating back to 10,000 years ago, were found, and the excavators had still not reached the bedrock of the site. The area below where the early archaic artifacts were found was called the Deep Hole. What was found in the Deep Hole is what made the Meadowcroft Rockshelter famous. A sphere point embedded in the settlement was carefully removed over a period of hours. It was determined to be somewhat smaller than sphere points from prehistoric times and was thought to be repeatedly sharpened to the point where it was no longer useful and left for trash. This found was called Miller Linseed in recognition of Albert Miller and believed to be 12,000 years old. The spot where it was found was called Miller Point, and additional artifacts and features were found beneath this point. One basket fragment was so fragile it took 2 days to uncover it, after injecting it with polyethylene glycol solution. These artifacts date between 11,300 and 16,000 BP. Authenticating radiocarbon dating. There are some discussions in the academic ranks on the authenticity of the radiocarbon dating that was used at Meadowcroft. It is believed that carbon elements contaminated the groundwater and may have strewn the carbon date readings, so they appear older than they really are. In 1999, a micromorphological analysis was done to clarify the depositional and post-depositional history of the site. For the most part, the outcome of this study confirmed the original work of the excavators, pointing to depositional attrition, roof fall, sheet wash, and revealed no evidence of groundwater contamination of the earlier levels. The fifth step of archaeology, which is to backfill the site when the excavation is completed, has not been done because after 46 years, Meadowcroft Rockshelter is still an active excavation site. Dr. James M. Advasio, who's still affiliated with the site, left 1/3 of the excavated site untouched, which he left for future archaeologists. This picture shows the unexcavated section of the site. James's reason for doing so is that he believed new technologies are constantly being developed that will aid future archaeologists in their excavations and analysis. The significance of the findings at Meadowcroft cannot be overstated. It gives us a unique insight into the ancestries of our human predecessors through tours, lectures, and presentations. The Meadowcroft Rockshelter and Historical Village provides an excellent educational experience with access to the original archaeologists and other experts in the field. New technologies. The study of the ancestry of our human predecessors could be improved with new technologies, such as DNA analysis. This technology, which wasn't available in the 1970s, is still an emerging technological method. This requires DNA samples, which hopefully could be found in the unexcavated sections. Overall, the Meadowcroft Rockshelter and Historic Village offers a unique experience. Visitors can explore an actual archaeological dig, not a recreation. The site is conveniently located to a major metropolitan area and is associated to a number of historic and educational facilities. You would be hard-pressed to find a better place than Meadowcroft, whose chief objective is to employ state-of-the-art methods to understand when humans arrived at this location, what they were doing whilst they were here, and how long they might have been here through time.